Ladies, gentlemen, brethren and companions, let me first of all extend a very warm welcome to you to this, the 5th edition of Enlightenment Live. My name's Steve Ricks and I'm a member of the Berkshire Lodge of Enlightenment, the chapter of Enlightenment and a member of the production team for Enlightenment Live. Enlightenment Live began life as the online presence of the Berkshire Lodge of Enlightenment as a way for us to reach out to members and friends of the Masonic province of Berkshire during the first lockdown when we were prevented from meeting in person. We hope that we're now moving towards happier times, but we will continue to produce and offer this online magazine with the intention of both stimulating and we hope satisfying curiosity about why as Masons we do the things that we do and what makes Freemasonry so compelling an interest for us. We've also recently witnessed the consecration of the Berkshire chapter of Enlightenment, which shares the overarching goals of the Enlightenment project in the province. So the project now comprises the Lodge, the chapter and Enlightenment Live. The three elements complement each other and provide a tangible reminder of the indissoluble link between the craft and the Royal Arch. In each edition we develop a central theme which is connected to events in the wider world or to the time of the year. In the last edition we began a series looking at the 4 cardinal virtues, starting with fortitude. In this edition we're taking a look at temperance and how this word is and has been interpreted in Freemasonry. So in our first article in this edition we're continuing with another article from our In the Chair series, and on this occasion Ian Clark will be talking to past Provincial Grand Master for Berkshire, Right Worshipful Brother Digby Woods, about temperance and what it means to him. Next we'll welcome a piece by Ian Hopgood, the most excellent Grand Superintendent of the Royal Arch Order in Berkshire, who will talk about the way that the idea of temperance, moderation and harmony is woven through the Royal Arch and its ritual. Our last article in this edition is the first of a new series in which we investigate the pros and cons of Masonic sources on the internet. And on this occasion, John Avery is taking the opportunity to have a look at and to review the Pietre Stones website. He'll look at how it deals with both the craft and the Royal Arch. So, to begin, let's look at temperance. I'm sure that to most people today the word temperance will immediately invoke the idea of abstinence from alcohol. Indeed, if you now Google the word, the definition that comes up is abstinence from alcoholic drink. So before we move on to temperance as moderation in general, let's look at its alcoholic connection in particular, because it does have some local Masonic connections for us to look at. Temperance movements began as a reaction to the excessive public consumption of alcohol in the 18th and early 19th centuries. At that time, the Industrial Revolution, the mechanisation of both agriculture and production, led to a movement of people from the countryside to the new mills and manufacturing areas in urban centres, and in these situations, alcohol became a problem. In the 18th century, the English artist William Hogarth depicted the depravity and dissolution of the people in a famous series of paintings and prints. 2 in particular stand out for us. The first is called Gin Lane, and it shows the effect of drunkenness and illustrates perhaps the origin of the name Mother's Ruin for gin. In the picture, an intoxicated nursing mother has allowed her infant to fall to the ground, whilst nearby a cadaverous figure appears on the point of death. The second print is called Night. In this picture we can see a worshipful master, probably the worse for wear, dressed in his apron and with his collar and master's jewel, being escorted by his Tyler with a drawn sword through streets full of disorder and destruction. Inevitably, the problem of public drunkenness and its consequences led to moral outrage and a social backlash. In the years of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, it was generally accepted that it was possible to improve anything and everything. Indeed, the evidence of improvements was all around in the scientific discoveries and technical advances of the day, and we know that one of the goals of Freemasonry was, and remains, the improvement of character. So anything which stood in the way of improvement was bound to become the focus of activists. Sure enough, the first temperance pledges were signed in 1847, and the signatories promised to abstain from alcohol. It was a teetotal promise, not just moderation, but complete abstinence, and such was the early Victorian enthusiasm for the temperance movement, that within a few years temperance societies were being established around the country, often with their own temperance halls, to provide safe meeting places for families away from pubs and taverns. Inevitably, following the popularity of the movement in communities around the country, temperance lodges were also formed. The earliest now still on the register is the Lodge of Temperance, number 898, which was consecrated in 1861 and still meets in London. The formation of these lodges was an interesting term because if we think back to the years following the formation of the Grand Lodge in 1717, most lodges were based in taverns, and we may suppose that alcohol played a significant part in their after proceedings, if not in the formal meetings. In Berkshire, there are two lodges which have connections to the temperance movement. Both meet in Windsor. The first of these is the Commercial Temperance Lodge, which was consecrated in 1906. Leslie Holborn and Robin White's book on the history of Berkshire and Buckinghamshire Freemasonry tells us that the lodge originated from meetings in London in 1905 to consider starting a temperance lodge outside but near to London. The province of Berkshire extended a cordial reception, and Windsor was chosen as the meeting place, the Etonian and Windsor Castle lodges sponsoring the petition. The name of the lodge derives from the Commercial Travellers Lodge number 2795 in London, and its emblem and banner depict a railway locomotive and a ship, symbolising commerce. Originally, the consumption of alcohol was banned at meetings, but the bylaws have since been amended to permit alcohol that's not been provided at the expense of the lodge. In 1917, just 11 years after its own consecration, the Commercial Temperance Lodge sponsored the foundation of the Theodore White Temperance Lodge. Worshipful Brother Theodore White was at that time the Provincial Grand Secretary and was instrumental in helping and petitioning for the new lodge, so it was the founder's wish that the lodge should be named after him. It is unusual for Grand Lodge to approve a lodge being named after a living person. However, Theodore White sadly died before the consecration, so unfortunately or fortunately, the founders got their wish. In 1917, there was still a lot of existing Victorian values, and so it was not unusual for some festive boards to be alcohol free. This was the case at Theodore White Temperance Lodge, but gradually this was relaxed, and the bylaws were amended in 1966. However, non-alcoholic drinks are still provided on the tables for those that do wish to abstain. This relaxation was in line with the broader guiding principles of Freemasonry, as we find in Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, which says, "Some Freemasons, very properly condemning the vice of intemperance and abhorring its effects, have been unwisely led to confound temperance with total abstinence in a Masonic application, and resolutions have sometimes been proposed in Grand Lodges which declare the use of stimulating liquors in any quantity a Masonic offence. But the laws of Freemasonry authorise no such regulation. It leaves to every man the indulgence of his own tastes within due limits and demands, not abstinence but only moderation and temperance." So, temperance is not just about moderation in the consumption of alcohol, it's about moderation in all aspects of our behaviour. So, let's now move on to temperance as a cardinal virtue. The idea of the cardinal virtues appear first in the writings of classical Greek and Eastern philosophers at about the same time. The four cardinal virtues being prudence, temperance, fortitude and justice. Plato considered temperance as the greatest virtue on which all the others depended. To live a virtuous life was considered the road to honour. This is a central idea in Freemasonry, and one we hear first at our initiation, when we're told that the apron, symbolising the craft, is more honourable than the garter or any other order in existence, being the badge of innocence and the bond of friendship. So the true meaning of temperance from a Masonic standpoint is about tempering our instincts or desires, moderation in all things. And if we give this a little thought, we can see that other related ideas give us clues about how to put this into practice. From moderation through restraint to self-control to mutual respect to tolerance and perhaps most importantly from the lodge's point of view, harmony. So that's the definition we want to explore, and now we'll move on to our next article, which is in our series entitled In the Chair. In this edition, Worshipful Brother Ian Clark is exploring the idea of temperance with Right Worshipful Brother Digby Woods.
First of all, let me give you a very warm welcome to Enlightenment Live. Right Worshipful Brother Digby Ralph Woods, past Provincial Grand Master of this province, and I have to say a Mason held in high esteem within the province, which is one reason why you are here, brother, to talk about temperance, which is our theme for this edition. What Steve has already covered, of course, has been the ideas of alcohol associated with temperance, and the way in which temperance organisations, including temperance lodges, came to the fore in the second half of the 19th century. And we indeed have two lodges with temperance in the names, and we may have others that were founded on similar principles. But what I would like to discuss with you today is another interpretation, perhaps a deeper interpretation of temperance, which takes it into the areas of self-control, moderation, self-restraint, and how that develops into foundational ideas in Freemasonry. How do you see temperance as being essential to that order?
Well, first of all, Freemasonry itself is really teaching temperance the whole time. Every aspect of it. There are many little stories, of course, within the ritual, which are just stories. But the actual teaching, which surrounds those stories, is teaching us all to be temperate, to be concerned for others, and not just others, but for animals and everything, every part of it. And the charge after initiation, for instance, really encapsulates how everybody, man and woman, should behave in life, or endeavour to behave. None of us will manage to do it totally, but it is a guide to temperance and many other aspects of life. I think you mentioned possibly how it affects people outside Freemasonry, and a typical example of that would be marriage. You must have, both of you, must have temperance, concern for each other. I remember a friend of mine many years ago, where I worked in Beauware in what was in southern Rhodesia, telling me, he said, you must always aim to give more than 50%.
In the marriage?
In a marriage.
Yes, yes.
And in fact, in everything.
In life, yes.
In life, yes.
Yes.
Give more than you take.
When we first started to think about the idea of temperance as an organising theme for this edition, my mind immediately went to parts of the ritual, and indeed outside the ritual, in the lectures. Because there's a lovely piece in the lecture where the master asks, why do you come here? Why do you come to the lodge? If all you bring is good wishes, hearty good wishes. I may be paraphrasing here, so forgive me. And the response is to learn to rule and subdue my passions, and to make an advancement in Freemasonry. And it seems to me that the advancement in Freemasonry is contingent upon learning to rule and control one's passions. And it could be that we're all subject to those sorts of knee-jerk responses, passionate sorts of responses, and we have to learn to control those urges and consider others in everything that we do. And the other thing that struck me, those words I also found in Pritchard's Masonry Dissected, which came from 1730. So these are not new ideas. These are very sort of ancient ideas. The other thing I found very interesting was that the idea of learn to rule, to control my passions, so that it's actually telling us that we need to make an effort to overcome those natural reactions that we may have, and to consider others and place others.
Yeah, I think some people are born with that temperance inbred into them. In the same way as a teacher is a born teacher and a manager is a born manager, others can be taught. And of course, those who are born that way can be improved. And so yes, the teaching is very important.
Topic beforehand, you mentioned the address to the wardens. I think.
Oh yes, yes. To my mind, well, actually, one of the most important lessons that it teaches is in that address to the wardens, when it says, "What you observe praiseworthy in others, you should carefully imitate. And what in them may appear defective, you should in yourself amend." And you see examples of this all over. Politicians in particular, who will slate somebody without looking to see that that's the very fault they have in themselves. But that's perhaps a private example. But I think that is so important, what you observe. And it's very difficult. If only we could see ourselves as others see us.
Yes, brother learns.
That's right, and it's. I think it comes in the third degree.
That most interesting of human studies.
Most interesting, of human studies. Knowledge of yourself. Very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Yes.
Unless you're helped often by others. Others, though, maybe those who say anything.
Do you think that this is one of the purposes of the lodge? Because the lodge is a group of, ideally, a group of friends who should be able to provide that feedback, that holding up the mirror to one's.
It's very difficult. I mean, myself personally, I wouldn't want to be discussing with even my close friends in the lodge my failings. I've done enough of them. I think we're all going to don't want to disclose them. So I don't think you can help in that way. All you can do is again observe others and think, yeah, that's how I must try to behave. In other words, copy what they're doing. And if you see, as happens many occasions, disharmony, think, why is it not in me, this cause of disharmony? And we had two lodges, I know, that were nearly founded many years ago, because one member caused so much trouble. Fortunately, Right Worshipful Brother Martin Peters managed to sort both of those out by actually suggesting that he left and went somewhere else. Whether they cause the same problem somewhere else or not, we don't know.
Yes. But I understand what you're saying here. I also think that groups working together sometimes find it difficult to realise that the outcomes are the products of the behaviour of the group. Now, there could be individuals within the group that are creating difficulties, but it's up to the group, the lodge, to find ways of dealing with that.
Yes, I mean, you find you go to the lodge and there's this atmosphere of happiness and love really is there, it's possible. In others you go and you're a bit worried. Not quite so sure.
What I observe is mutual. If one sees mutual support, brethren helping each other, and not being critical, as the wardens address the wardens suggests, that's when you get that warm feeling of happiness in a lodge.
I'm an honorary member of about 60 lodges in the province, and I'm endeavouring to go to each one before I'm too old to cross the Stones, as you know, I won the other way. And I've been going to 3 lodges at a time, one day, middle, and then so And it's very noticeable the differences between them. Some are still welcoming, some not so much.
You have a terrific perspective of the changes that have taken place within Freemasonry over the last 50 or 60 years. How would you say we've improved, and how perhaps where we need to improve?
Well, I can give an actual example in my own lodge. My lodge was founded in 1930, and the leading knight was the headmaster at the time, Freddie King. When I joined the lodge in 1960, he was a grand officer already, and really was the father of the lodge. We did the best that we could. I think we were expected actually to do the whole ceremony. That's what I did, of course. We had to do the whole ceremony, everything.
Yes.
And we had one chap who tried desperately to learn, but he wasn't really good enough. And Freddie King said, "You're not going through the chair because you're not good enough with the ritual." And that has stayed with me all my Masonic life. I've said to people, if people try, then we have to do all we can to assist them, even if it means they just open and close the lodge. If they work for the lodge, they've done so much, not just in the lodge, perhaps in life itself. Put them through the master's chair. Because that is, again, I suppose it's a form of temperance. And I've seen this change quite considerably. I mean, that was the case in point in my own lodge. But I noticed generally there's this more willingness to share the ritual, which of course is, in my mind, is much better because you get different voices.
Yes.
People speaking.
Yes.
So there's a big change for the better.
What about how do you see us coming out of the pandemic and the constraints that we've suffered as a result of that?
Well, I think there's a big problem. A number of people will have got out of the habit of coming, and some of them sort of looked at how much money they're saving, and they'll say, "Well, really, I'm going to have to resign from a few lodges, not from all of them, cut back on things." Fortunately, we seem to have a number of younger men wanting to join and are joining. And they, of course, are going to be the future. But it's going to take time. And it's the side orders that I think are going to suffer the most because they feed on people who are coming into craft. And so it's going to be some time before many of these young men feels that they want to move over to the Royal Arch and Monk, Royal Arch and other Christian degrees. So that's where I think the main problem is going to be.
Yeah. I've observed some lodges where the numbers were already fairly small, and it was therefore difficult to operate the lodge to get brethren to take office and so on. And some of those actually really more thoughtful brethren seem to be then more reluctant to introduce new members into that environment because it doesn't really live up to their expectations of what a lodge should be doing. And I do see that as being a difficulty.
When you say what a lodge should be doing, do you mean in the ritual?
Well, I mean, yes, I guess so. I think when you see a team working well together, people relax. That pleasure that one takes from observing a team working well together in the ritual and delivering a good ceremony for the candidate is something which is infectious, and it encourages other people to visit. When that's missing, when there's an edge or a lack of support, we would say perhaps a lack of harmony in the lodge, then it becomes more difficult, I think, to recover from that position. Which is why I think that demonstrations of brotherly love, in whatever form it is, are so important, really. And that here we come back full circle to the idea of temperance and moderation and mutual respect.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've come across, as I said, I've been to quite a number of lectures. I think I've been to about 30 in the last 4 months. And it always annoys me when a brother says, yes, I'll be able to do that, and can't. You practice it in the bath. But of course, when they come to actually do it, they falter, they're continually being prompted, and it destroys the ceremony, particularly for the candidate. I just wish people would concentrate on doing one thing at a time well, and if they're having difficulty, ask for help. Ask someone else to help them out. And then that's where we come back to the whole lodge contributing.
Working together.
Working together.
Yes, yes. It's fascinating because I'm nowhere near being a member as long as you have, but one of the things which strikes me is that as I sit and observe and listen closely to ceremonies, I hear new things, I hear new ideas.
In the last 5 weeks, I've seen 4 things in the lodge which I've never seen before.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was quite amazing. So, yeah,
Good things.
and I've been nearly 62 years.
Yes. Well, Digby, thank you. Thank you very much for coming and spending some time with us and sharing your knowledge and thoughts with us. I hope you could spend another 60 years in Freemasonry.
Thank you, Ian. That, as I would have expected, is a thought-provoking and insightful analysis from Right Worshipful Brother Digby. Now let's hear from the Grand Superintendent, excellent companion Ian Hopgood, about the way that the idea of temperance, moderation and harmony is woven through the Royal Arch and its ritual.
Brethren and companions, welcome to the Royal Arch section of this Enlightenment Live edition. Earlier in this edition, we were enlightened with an excellent introduction to the Temperance movement, including its history and background since the early 1800s and its links with Craft Masonry in Berkshire. Temperance should be interpreted as a state of mind and character that influences our conduct in our ultimate search of a virtuous life. When seen as fundamental to the concept of individual choice and responsibility, it becomes a conscious act of moderation, mutual respect, self-control, and harmony in our own beliefs and behaviours, which, as we all know, is amply illustrated throughout Freemasonry in general. In this session, we will explore how the thread of temperance weaves its benign influence through Royal Arch Masonry in particular. With a reasonably good understanding of the order, it is not difficult to tease out some of the more prominent examples as we follow its thread through the Royal Arch terminology and symbols, through the dedicated actions surrounding the ceremonies of the order, and indeed the narrative embedded within the ritual. There are, of course, too many instances to describe each and every one, but I would like to share some of the primary points, and I will leave the remainder to your own research. As a starting point, let us begin with the fundamental terminology and symbols of Royal Arch Masonry. Most Freemasons, and certainly all Master Masons, have heard the term companion, either as part of their general knowledge of the Holy Royal Arch, or, if you are a Master Mason, from your 3rd degree ceremony, when you were raised to a reunion with the former companions of your toils. The term companion is used to describe and address a Royal Arch Mason in the same way that the term brother is used in Craft Masonry. The word companion comes from the Latin words com, meaning with, and panis, meaning bread, and when used together, meaning one who eats bread with another. The very simplicity of selecting bread, the most staple of all dietary foods, and not some more exotic food, indeed suggests moderation. And it cannot be denied that the act of sharing demonstrates a mutual respect and a desire for harmony with another. A companion can be identified by the beautiful Royal Arch jewel, which should always be worn on the left breast, nearest to the heart, in both chapter and craft lodge meetings, as a visible sign of the indissoluble link between craft and Royal Arch Masonry. This jewel is primarily comprised of two interlacing equilateral triangles, surrounded by two concentric circles. But what of their meaning? The triangles are supposed to represent the twofold nature of man. The triangle with its apex pointing upwards, an emblem of the deity, denoting the spiritual nature, and that with its apex pointing downwards, the emblem of a perfect man, denoting the material aspects. When these triangles are interlaced, as shown in the jewel, they are emblematical of the perfect man in complete union with his God. The two triangles, being identical and equilateral, can be seen as balanced and without favour, which is synonymous with moderation and mutual respect in each. Similarly, the geometrical, interlaced nature of these triangles depicts unity and harmony with each other. The threads of temperance are also readily apparent in the physical actions associated with the Royal Arch ritual, and leads us to contemplate their symbolism as well as their extended meaning. For example, at the opening of a Royal Arch chapter, the three principles come together to form an equilateral triangle around the volume of the sacred law, and in turn engage with equal gestures to open the convocation. These several but conjoint sequences clearly demonstrate a mutual respect for each other. The actions are followed by wording, shared as part of the opening ritual, where each of the principles in turn repeat that they meet in peace, love, and unity. These open words already spell out for themselves a powerful act of harmony, and no further explanation or symbolism needs to be drawn. A similar procedure is delivered at the closing of the convocation, symbolizing that mutual respect and harmony are implored from the start, the opening, to the finish, the closing, of a Royal Arch convocation. Exploring deeper into the ritual, further examples of mutual respect and harmony are evident in portions of the obligations of the new principles during the installation ceremony of a chapter. Prior to his obligation, the third principle, Joshua, makes a promise to act in conjunction with the other two principles in supporting the dignity of the order, also the peace, harmony, and unity of the chapter. This open pledge clearly demonstrates a respect for his colleagues and a conscious intention to promote harmony within the chapter. Additionally, during the obligation of the first principle, Zerubbabel continues the thread of mutual respect with an equal pledge to act in conjunction with the other two principles, and perhaps more specifically, the thread of harmony, by promising to preserve that bond of harmony and fraternal union which has ever been the foundation of our whole Masonic structure. In continued alignment with the Royal Arch, the Temperance theme once again surfaces during the presentation of the principal's robes and scepters after installation. From the crown surmounting the scepter of the Most Excellent, we learn that Zerubbabel must employ moderation and respect by subjecting his passions and prejudices to the dominion of reason and charity, if he is to reign sovereign over the hearts and minds of men. Much wider ties with temperance are embedded in the narrative, presenting the robes of the second principal Haggai. Its colour purple is described as an emblem of union, being composed of blue and crimson, and is designed to remind Haggai that his constant aim should be the union and harmony of the chapter. He is encouraged to promote harmony within the chapter by using his exertions to dispel the gloom of jealousy and discord whenever it arises. Furthermore, he is instructed to practice moderation by avoiding all occasions of giving offence or of entertaining any subject which might cause dissension and division within its members. In summary, the cardinal virtue of temperance and its component parts of moderation, mutual respect, self-control and harmony do indeed weave a golden thread through the Holy Royal Arch and its rich symbolism and ritual, as we have seen. A visible sign that practice and understanding of Royal Arch Masonry will contribute to your search for a more virtuous life. Brethren and companions, I hope this brief article has stimulated your interest and enthusiasm for knowledge and learning of the Royal Arch. For those Master Masons wishing to complete their pure ancient Freemasonry and experience our beautiful and colourful exaltation ceremony, there is a small brochure introducing the Royal Arch degree, which we would be pleased to send you. Please email the Provincial Grand Scribe Ezra at pgse@bpgc.org.uk. Thank you, brethren and companions.
Thank you, Ian. Not surprisingly, a lot of similarities with the craft. In the final piece of this edition, John Avery is reviewing an excellent Masonic resource, Pietre Stones. Let's hear from John.
Hello everyone. This is something new for Enlightenment Live. A review of one of the many and varied websites that can be found with a Google search of the words Freemasonry. The website I've chosen for this first review is called Pietre Stones and can be found at this web address. If you have any trouble finding it, just Google Freemasonry papers and it will appear on the first page, like this. The Pietre Stones website is produced in America, but with contributions from every part of the world and from lodges governed by many separate constitutions. Therefore, I must give you a warning. Some of the things you discover when using this website will not necessarily apply to the workings of lodges in this country, under the direction of the United Grand Lodge of England. However, everything you discover in these pages will be true and in accordance with the author's constitution, as there are no malicious or anti-Masonry content to be found in the Pietre Stones website. With this caution in mind, let's take a look at the structure and content of this excellent source of Masonic knowledge. The opening page contains a long listing of papers covering both craft and Royal Arch topics, with side boxes listing specific topics. The two papers I've chosen to review are to be found on the first page. The first is by Very Worshipful Brother Gary Kirkin, a Freemason from New Zealand. His paper is called Whither the Royal Arch and was presented to the research chapter of New Zealand in 2007. Brother Gary has written many other papers, some of which are listed here. So let's look at the topics covered in this paper. First is something that is close to the beliefs of the Berkshire Enlightenment family, that understanding and knowledge are essential to enjoying membership of the Craft and the Royal Arch. Secondly, that we should always pursue excellence in everything that we do as brethren and companions. And thirdly, to this end, encouragement is always the watchword. In his paper, Gary Kirkin then addresses the problem of how to recruit companions to join the Royal Arch, when so few Master Masons do so, and he suggests what some solutions might be. He then looks at what the appeal of Royal Arch membership might be. So let's look at some of the 8 reasons that he gives, starting with number 3, which I doubt many of you will understand at first, as the wearing of hats in chapter is no longer common in this country, although it obviously still is in New Zealand. The hats he is referring to are depicted here in this old photograph, showing the 3 principals. The MEZ wearing a crown, as he represents a royal personage. Joshua, representing as he does the son of a high priest, wears a mitre. And Haggai, being a prophet, wears what is considered the correct headwear for an academic. Nowadays, a toque is the hat worn by a baker or chef. He next considers the robes of the 3 principals. He suggests they may be welcome during winter, but not so much when the weather turns warmer. Next, Gary Kirkin addresses the difference in the look between chapter and lodge. He especially notes that the vibrant colours compared with the plain blue of the Craft might be a factor, especially the more multicoloured regalia. He then continues in his paper to expand on these themes, providing much food for thought. Very worshipful Brother Gary Kirkin is obviously a skillful and experienced lecturer in the New Zealand Masonic scene, and someone we should take notice of. Now we should take a look at a craft paper on the Pietre Stones website. And the one I have chosen is by someone well known in Masonic circles here in the UK. Brother Julian Rees, who over the years has written many papers on Craft Masonry. The paper I wish to review is called The Way to the Centre. Now, Brother Julian has always referred to himself as a seeker after the inner meaning of Freemasonry. And in this paper, he will take us on a journey towards that somewhat mystical reference we first hear described in the first degree tracing board, the centre. This centre is where Masons are expected to discover something important, and the paper was written to act as a guide. So let's take a look at the topics covered. As I've already alluded to, we're on a journey of discovery. A journey that starts at our initiation, where we are to address for the first time a definition of what Freemasonry is, as given in the ritual to the question posed at our passing, what is Freemasonry? But here Brother Julian has to confess he is not happy with this definition contained in our ritual and shown here, as he believes it belittles or shortchanges, as he puts it, our understanding of what he believes the central study of Freemasonry should be, the study of allegory and symbolism. As he says, the essence of Freemasonry cannot be put into words. A picture or a map are not the articles they represent. One aspect of an item, such as the colour of a flower, leaves out several other characteristics, like fragrance and the same applies to our symbolism and allegory. To demonstrate this, he then goes on to discover several symbols and to dissect them. For example, let's look at a symbol we're all familiar with, as it appears on the door of every Masonic temple, known as the Star of David or the Seal of Solomon, comprising two equilateral triangles laid one over each other, one pointing up, representing us, the other pointing down, signifying the great architect, and when combined, union of one with the other. However, the symbolism is not complete when the two triangles are interwoven. As Brother Julian Rees suggests that the Masonic symbols need to be considered on several levels, and that in order to fully understand both the symbolism, allegory, and ourselves, we need to discover our personal center. And this will also require that we discover who or what we really are. To discover, as Julian puts it, the spark of divinity within us, something that, Masonically speaking, can only be found at the center. Deep thoughts, indeed. But to summarize, Brother Julian Rees is attempting in this paper to open a pathway for us to travel between the superficial meaning of our ritual and the hidden, deeper depths, to assist in opening our eyes and understanding and letting in some Masonic light, so we can discover our personal center where knowledge of ourself can be found. So what do we think of these two papers and the Pietre Stones website in general? On the plus side, it is easily accessible. It features a wide range of Masonic topics covering both the craft and the Royal Arch, and has contributors from every Masonic constitution. On the slightly negative side, having such a wide-ranging contribution from other constitutions, we need to be careful when applying what we learn here to lodges in this country under the United Grand Lodge of England. However, overall, a useful source of information which I thoroughly recommend you investigate. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Thank you, John. That looks an excellent resource. Finally, it's time to close Enlightenment Live until our next edition. If you have any questions or feedback for us, please send an email to s9946@berkspgl.org.uk with edition 5 in the subject line, and we'll get back to you. The presenters and the production team behind the planning, development and delivery of this edition all hope that you found something of interest and something that's whetted your curiosity. Goodbye until the next edition.